The Tellarites broke us 100 years ago. Now it's our turn to break them. Dylan Green slammed the shot glass down on the grimy bar counter, the burn of Batarian whiskey still scorching his throat. He glanced around the dimly lit dive, making sure no one was eavesdropping. The other patrons, a motley assortment of aliens nursing their drinks, paid him no attention. Perfect. He leaned in close to his two companions, Mac and Rick. The Tellarites think they stomped out the last bit of human resistance when they bombarded the Mars colony, but those arrogant six-legged cockroaches don't know we've been biding our time, waiting to strike back and take our revenge. Over the long bleak decades, the Terran refugees became little more than resources to be exploited for the Tellarite Empire's gain. Some were subjected to horrific experiments in the name of advancing Tellarite science. Many more were forced to battle alien creatures and each other in brutal gladiatorial matches for the amusement of the masses. All the while, Linux and his successors systematically stripped away any trace of the prisoners' culture and history until most couldn't even remember the name of their homeworld. But some humans never forgot. In the shadows of the Tellarite labor camps and the dark bowels of their cities, a spark of defiance still smoldered. Parents whispered stories of Earth's blue skies and green hills to their children. The broken remnants of old resistance cells carefully gathered weapons and supplies, waiting for the right time to reignite the fight. And now, at long last, that moment had arrived. "The Tellarites are about to get a nasty surprise," Dylan said, his voice low and fierce. "We've got teams in position to take out their main power generators and communications hubs. Once those go down, their defenses will be crippled. That's when our fleet makes its move." Rick frowned. "It's a big risk. If we fail, the Tellarites will squash us like bugs, might even decide to wipe out the last humans once and for all." "We won't fail," Max said firmly. "We can't. This is our one shot to hit them hard enough to turn the tide. It's not just about getting our freedom back. It's about making sure humanity has a future." Dylan nodded grimly. All his life he had been waiting for this chance. To make the Tellarites pay for every atrocity, every humiliation, to show them that the human spirit could never be broken. "Whatever it takes," he said, "we'll fight to our last breath. The Tellarites made the mistake of leaving any of us alive. Time to show them why it's the worst mistake they'll ever make." He raised his empty glass in a solemn toast, to the Resistance and to Earth. "To Earth," Mac and Rick echoed. As they put the plan into motion, Dylan felt a sense of grim determination take hold. This was humanity's last stand, their final chance to reclaim their destiny among the stars. Come what may, they would see this through to the end. The Tellarites thought they had reduced humanity to a mere footnote in galactic history, but the Sons of Earth would make sure the galaxy never forgot their names. The pieces were in motion. Dylan, Mac, and Rick slipped into the shadows, the dim light of Earth's moon guiding their steps. The Tellarite military communications hub loomed ahead, a squat, heavily fortified structure overflowing with sensor arrays and pulse cannons. "Rick, you're up," Dylan whispered, as they crouched behind a low wall. Rick nodded, his fingers already dancing over the console of his jury-rigged hacking rig. Data streams reflected off his face as he probed the Tellarite systems, searching for a way in. Mac kept watch, his pulse rifle trained on the entrances. After an eternity, Rick looked up, a fierce grin splitting his face. "I'm in, and you won't believe what I found. The location of General Linux's command ship, in geosynchronous orbit right above us." Dylan's heart raced. This was the chance they had been waiting for. A shot at the head of the Tellarite occupation. "Patch it through to the resistance cells. We're going after Linux. If we can take him out, the Tellarites will be thrown into chaos." Within hours, a strike team assembled. Using codes Rick had extracted, they slipped aboard a Tellarite shuttle and bluffed their way into the belly of Linux's ship. The hangar deck was cavernous, swarming with Tellarite soldiers and technicians. "Remember," Dylan said, checking the charge on his plasma rifle, "we fight our way to the bridge, whatever it takes." All hell broke loose as the humans burst from the shuttle, weapons blazing. Tellarite troops fell, screeching as searing plasma bolts tore through their ranks, but more rushed in, bearing down on the attackers with overwhelming force. Mac went down, his leg shredded by a grazing shot. Dylan hauled him up, half dragging him as they fought on. Rick danced through the chaos, his blades flashing as he carved a path forward. Corridor by blood-slicked corridor, they battled toward the bridge, leaving a trail of Tellarite dead in their wake. But the resistance paid a heavy price. For every defender that fell, a human fighter died, cut down by the relentless Tellarite onslaught. At last they burst onto the bridge, a hurricane of fire and fury. And there, at the center of it all, stood General Linux. Dylan lunged at him, a roar of pure hate tearing from his throat. They crashed together, Linux's barbed chitin scraping against Dylan's battle armor as they grappled. The general was strong, his movements precise and brutal, but Dylan was driven by a lifetime of rage and loss. Around them, the bridge descended into madness. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, bodies slammed to the deck. Rick and the last few resistance fighters held the doorway, pouring fire at the Tellarite reinforcements flooding in. Linux slammed Dylan back against a bulkhead, his mandibles spread in a vicious leer. "Did you really think it would be this easy, human?" the general hissed. "We've known about your little resistance for cycles. I've been looking forward to crushing you myself." Ice flooded Dylan's veins. The Tellarites had played them. Let them think they had a chance just to rip it away. Linux pressed his advantage, fangs flashing inches from Dylan's face. "Even now my forces are wiping out your pathetic rebels. When this is over, the human infestation will be nothing but a memory." The viewscreens flared with light as ships dropped out of warp, the resistance fleet. But instead of the havoc they were supposed to wreak, the human ships hung dead in space. Trap. Dylan and Linux exchanged more blows as the enemy warship began to shake and shudder. The general laughed, a coughed and bitter sound. The Tellarite fleet had the humans surrounded by an ambush of their own strategy turned against them. Dylan saw the battle for space turn against them, while consoles screamed alerts about the crippling damage being done to Linux's flagship from the unexpected battle. "No matter what you do here, human, your resistance will fall today, your entire species, and it will be a pleasure to erase your ilk from the galaxy." Dylan leapt onto Linux, wrestling to wrest his disruptor free with manic rage and zero regard for the damage he was taking. They traded blows, matching wounds, as the ship fell apart around them. "Rick," Mac shouted suddenly, "you need to take this now." He threw something, what looked like a small drive like the ones used for smuggling data. It landed at Rick's feet and he bent to grab it, confused. In that moment, 2 searing plasma bolts struck Mac in the chest. He dropped, twitching, but managed one last bloody grin. "Data drive, worm code, use it." Rick rolled as a Tellarite lunged, driving his blades into the alien's belly. All around their force was broken, the attack in disarray. Tellarites filled the bridge, weapons locked onto Dylan as he and the general struggled. Somewhere in the chaos, something that Mac had said cracked open in Rick's mind. A virus, something that might give them a chance to at least bring the enemy down with them. But time had run out. Rick glanced about desperately, searching for an interface. The command systems were shattered, sparks spitting from exposed circuits. Then he saw it. The comms station, still intact. It was connected to the main data stream, the one linking the entirety of the Tellarite fleet. If he could get to it, there was a chance to upload Mac's virus across every enemy ship in range. He shifted his grip on the data drive, feeling its edges dig into his palm. One last run, a final act of defiance in this doomed assault. Even now, he could feel the thrum of the flagship's engines failing, the deck tilting beneath his feet. Somewhere behind him, he heard Dylan roar in agony and rage. The sounds of human ships dying filled the comms. But that didn't matter now. All that mattered was the single slim possibility of a counterstrike. A few seconds on that console. Rick charged, hurling his last grenade into the Tellarite ranks. In its wake he ran, firing until his rifle clicked empty, and still he ran, sprinting for the chance to make a difference. In the hearts of the ships beyond, he knew the other humans fought and fell, betrayed and beaten. It wasn't supposed to end this way. They were meant to be free. He lunged for it, max drive in hand. One way or another he would see this through. It was up to him now, to decide what mark humanity would leave on the universe. Rick stumbled forward, clutching the data drive in his bloodied hand. The ship's corridors echoed with the sounds of battle and the screech of failing systems. He had to reach the comms array, had to give humanity one last shot. A Tellarite soldier rounded the corner, mandibles clicking in fury. Rick ducked under a plasma blast, the heat searing his scalp. He slammed into the alien, driving his knee up hard. As the Tellarite doubled over, Rick smashed its head against the bulkhead. The alien dropped, twitching. Rick snatched up the fallen plasma rifle and kept moving. His demolitions training kicked in as he assessed weak points in the ship's structure. A well-placed shot here, an overloaded power conduit there. He carved a path of destruction toward his goal. Inside, Tellarite technicians scrambled for weapons. Rick's stolen rifle spat death, cutting them down before they could return fire. He slammed the data drive into a port, fingers flying over the console. "Come on," he muttered, willing the upload to complete. A garbled transmission crackled over the ship's speakers. Dylan's voice strained with pain and fury. "Rick, the virus! It'll take out our ships too, but we have to do it. It's the only way." Rick's blood ran cold. He glanced at the upload progress bar, then at the dead Tellarites scattered around him. All those lives. And now he'd be responsible for even more deaths. Human deaths. His finger hovered over the broadcast button. Could he do it? Sacrifice so many of his own people? The ship rocked violently. Through the viewports, Rick saw flashes of weapons fire, human ships trading blows with the massive Tellarite fleet. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Without the virus, they'd all die anyway. Rick pursed his lips and slammed his palm down on the button. "Forgive me," he whispered. Alarms blared as the virus tore through the ship's systems. Rick spun, rifle raised, as Tellarite soldiers poured through the shattered doorway. He opened fire, each shot another life on his conscience. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Rick stumbled, vision blurring. He fired blindly, buying precious seconds as the virus spread. On the bridge, Dylan roared in triumph as Linux fell. But there was no time to savor the victory. He turned to face the general's guards, knowing each moment he held them off gave Rick a better chance. The ship bucked and shuddered. Through the windows, Dylan watched Tellarite vessels begin to explode one after another. But mixed in with the enemy ships, human vessels were erupting into fireballs too. Dylan closed his eyes for a moment, silently honoring the sacrifice. Then he threw himself back into the fray, determined to see this through to the bitter end. Fires raged throughout the Tellarite command ship, as system after system failed. Dylan fought his way to the main reactor controls, every step a battle against the dying vessel and the remaining Tellarite crew. "This is for all of us," he snarled, slamming down the final command. The reactor core went critical. In a blinding flash of light and energy, the Tellarite flagship tore itself apart, taking a huge swath of both fleets with it. As the explosive shockwave rippled outward, the remaining human and Tellarite ships alike tumbled through space, crippled or destroyed. For long moments, there was only silence and drifting debris where two mighty armadas had clashed. Then, improbably, a few battered vessels began to move under their own power. Mostly Tellarite, but here and there, a human ship limped away from the devastation. On Earth, pockets of resistance fighters emerged from underground bunkers and hidden bases. They stared at the sky, where flashes of light marked the death throes of the great space battle. A resistance cell leader in the ruins of what had once been Shanghai grabbed a crackling radio. "Did we do it?" she demanded. "Is it over?" For a moment there was only static. Then a weary voice replied, "The Tellarites are in retreat. We've bloodied them bad, but the cost—" The voice broke off. The resistance leader closed her eyes, imagining the scale of the losses. But when she opened them again, there was steel in her gaze. "Then we honor the fallen by finishing what they started," she said. "Gather everyone. We've got a planet to take back." All across the ravaged Earth, humans began to emerge. They looked to the stars with a mix of fear and hope, knowing the Tellarites were wounded, but not destroyed. The war wasn't over. But for the first time in living memory, victory seemed possible. In the shadowy places they began to plan, to rebuild, to prepare for whatever might come next. The dust settled on Earth, but the fight was a long way to go. Zeke crouched in the ruins of what used to be a shopping mall, his eyes scanning the horizon. Tellarite patrols marched through the streets, their chitinous armor glinting in the harsh sunlight. "They're everywhere," he muttered into his comm. "Krallick's not messing around." Zeke slipped through the shadows, dodging Tellarite search beams. He met up with Max and the other resistance leaders in an abandoned subway tunnel. Their faces were grim, etched with exhaustion and loss. "It's all right, people," Max said, spreading out a crumpled map. "We've got one shot at this. Intel says there's a weapons cache here." He jabbed a finger at a spot on the outskirts of the city. "Experimental stuff. Might be our only chance to kick these bastards off our planet." Zeke nodded. "I'll lead the strike team. We'll need a diversion." "Leave that to me," Max said, his eyes hard. "Just get those weapons." They moved out under cover of darkness. Zeke led his team through sewers and collapsed buildings, relying on intel from a Tellarite turncoat. They reached the depot, a nondescript warehouse surrounded by guards. Explosions rocked the night. Max's diversion team hit a Tellarite command post across town, drawing away half the depot's guards. Zeke's team struck. They breached the perimeter in a hail of gunfire. Zeke took down 2 Tellarites with precise shots, rolling behind a crate as return fire peppered his position. His team pushed forward, securing the entrance. Inside, they found racks of sleek alien weaponry. Zeke's eyes widened as he recognized antimatter warhead casings. "Jackpot," he breathed. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared and Tellarite reinforcements swarmed the depot. Zeke's team was pinned down, the precious weapons just out of reach. Max's voice came over the comm, breathless from his own firefight. "I'm coming in. Get those weapons out, whatever it takes." Zeke watched in awe as Max's team charged the Tellarite line, drawing fire. It was a suicide run, but it gave Zeke the opening he needed. They loaded the antimatter warheads onto a stolen transport and punched through the weakened Tellarite defense. As they sped away, Zeke saw Max fall, overwhelmed by Tellarite soldiers. His heart clenched, but he knew Max had made his choice. They regrouped with other resistance cells, arming the warheads and planning their counterattack. But before they could strike, the sky lit up with fire. Krallick had ordered orbital bombardment, leveling entire cities. Zeke stared at the destruction, his fists clenched. "We end this now," he said, dispatching teams to plant the warheads at key Tellarite strongholds. As Earth burned, Max sat in a cold cell beneath Krallick's command center. The Tellarite general loomed over him, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "Your resistance dies today," Krallick hissed. "I will crush every last human." Max spat blood and grinned. "You're too late. The antimatter's already in play. You lose, bug." Krallick's compound eyes widened in shock. He barked orders, scrambling to find the hidden warheads. But deep down, he knew the humans had outplayed him, and soon the world would burn again, this time taking the Tellarite occupation with it. General Krallick paced the bridge of his flagship, his compound eyes darting between holographic displays of Earth's surface. Red blips marked potential antimatter warhead sites, each one a ticking time bomb that could spell doom for his invasion force. "Dispatch all available strike teams," Krallick barked, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "I want those warheads found and disarmed, now!" In the ruins of New York City, Commander Grax led his elite Tellarite squad through the shattered remnants of human civilization. They moved with practiced efficiency, their chitinous armor scraping against broken concrete and twisted metal. Grax's antennae twitched as he picked up a faint energy signature. "There," he hissed, pointing toward a collapsed skyscraper. "The humans are guarding something." "Hold the line," Jax shouted to his comrades. "We can't let them near that warhead. Grax's team unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, the air filling with the acrid smell of ozone and burning flesh. Human screams mixed with the chittering of Tellarite war cries as the resistance fighters were cut down one by one. Jax watched in horror as his friends fell. He fired back, his shots finding gaps in Tellarite armor, but it wasn't enough. As the last of his squad crumpled to the ground, Jax made a split-second decision. He bolted, ducking and weaving through the rubble as Grax bellowed orders to pursue. Jax's heart pounded in his ears as he led the Tellarites on a treacherous chase through unstable buildings and debris-choked streets. In their hidden command center, Zeke and the resistance leaders monitored the unfolding chaos. Holographic maps showed Tellarite strike teams converging on warhead sites across the globe. "Jax is buying us time," Zeke said, his voice tight with tension. "But we're running out of options." Above the planet, Kralek's patience wore thin. He slammed a clawed hand onto his command console. "Enough of this. Commence orbital bombardment. Scour every suspected warhead location from orbit." Back in New York, Jax's luck finally ran out. He stumbled, his foot catching on a twisted piece of rebar, and Grax's team was on him in seconds. Rough hands seized him, dragging him before the Tellarite commander. Grax loomed over Jax, his mandibles dripping with anticipation. "Where is the warhead, human?" he snarled. Jax spat blood and grinned up at his captor. "Tick-tock, bugface," he taunted. "Better hurry." Grax's eyes narrowed in fury. He grabbed Jax by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "Search everything," he roared to his troops. "Turn this sector inside out." As Tellarite soldiers tore through the ruins, Zeke made the call. His finger hovered over the detonation command, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. With a deep breath, he pressed the button. Across the globe, antimatter warheads activated in perfect synchronization. The air itself seemed to tear apart as matter and antimatter collided, releasing unimaginable energy. In New York, Jax saw the flash an instant before the shockwave hit. He closed his eyes, a smile on his lips as the world around him dissolved into blinding light and searing heat. The antimatter detonations ripped through Tellarite strongholds, vaporizing alien troops and hardware. Kralek's orbital fleet reeled from the onslaught, their bombardment faltering as explosions tore through their ranks. As the devastation subsided, Zeke emerged from the command bunker, his eyes widening at the changed landscape. Where Tellarite fortifications had stood, only smoking craters remained. He grabbed his comm unit, broadcasting on all resistance frequencies. "This is our moment. All units engage the enemy. Drive them from our world." Across the planet, humanity rose up. Resistance fighters emerged from hidden bases, striking at disoriented Tellarite forces with fury born of years of oppression. In orbit, General Kralek stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His once mighty invasion force was in tatters, under attack from a reinvigorated human resistance. "General," one of his officers chittered nervously, "what are your orders?" Kralek's mandibles worked silently as he weighed his options. Fight a losing battle or retreat in disgrace. Either way, the humans had... General Kralek stood on the bridge of his flagship, his compound eyes flickering between holographic displays. The antimatter strikes had devastated his forces, leaving smoking craters where Tellarite strongholds once stood. He clicked his mandibles in frustration. "General," his second-in-command chittered nervously, "our ground forces are being overrun. We can't hold the planet." Kralek's antennae twitched as he processed the information. With a heavy sigh, he made the call. "Order all remaining troops to fall back. We're withdrawing to orbit." As Tellarite ships disengaged from Earth's atmosphere, Zeke watched from a makeshift command center. He turned to his fellow resistance leaders, his eyes gleaming with possibility. "This is our chance," Zeke said, pointing to a holographic representation of Kralek's flagship. "We take out Kralek, we end this war." Zeke nodded, studying the scarred warrior. "You sure you're up for this?" Within hours, Jack stood in a captured Tellarite shuttle alongside Silas and a hand-picked team of resistance fighters. They approached the flagship, tension thick in the air. "Control," "This is Shuttle TR-117 requesting emergency docking," Silas transmitted, his voice steady despite the risk. "We have wounded aboard." There was a pause that felt like an eternity before the flagship's docking bay doors slid open. Jax's team moved swiftly, weapons at the ready. As soon as they cleared the airlock, all hell broke loose. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Jax and Silas split their forces. "Go," Jax shouted to Silas. "Take out those engines." Silas nodded grimly and led his team deeper into the ship. Jax turned to his own soldiers. "With me, we're headed for the bridge." They fought their way through narrow corridors, the acrid smell of ozone filling the air with each exchange of fire. Jax's team suffered losses, but they pressed on relentlessly. On the bridge, Kralek barked orders to his elite guards. "Hold them back, we cannot lose this ship." The doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Jax charged through the smoke, his eyes locked on Kralek. Time seemed to slow as the two adversaries faced each other. Kralek's mandibles clicked in fury. "You," he hissed, "I should have killed you when I had the chance." Jax's lips curled into a snarl. "You had your chance, now it's my turn." They clashed in a fury of fists and claws. Kralek's strength was formidable, but Jax matched him blow for blow, driven by years of pent-up rage. Around them, the bridge erupted into chaos. Human resistance fighters grappled with Tellarite guards in brutal close-quarters combat. Kralek landed a vicious strike, sending Jax stumbling backward. The Tellarite commander loomed over him, mandibles dripping. "I've crushed millions of your kind," he taunted. "What makes you think you're any different?" Jax spat blood and surged to his feet. "Because we never stop fighting," he snarled, launching himself at Kralek with renewed fury. Their battle raged on as Jax's team slowly gained the upper hand. One by one, Kralek's guards fell. With a final desperate lunge, Jax drove Kralek to the ground. The Tellarite general lay wounded, Jax's boot pressed against his throat. Kralek glared up at his conqueror, defiant to the last. "Kill me if you must," he wheezed. "But know this, the Tellarite Empire will never surrender Earth. We will return, stronger than ever." Jax's expression hardened. "You're wrong," he said coldly. "Humanity's spirit can't be broken, no matter how long it takes. We'll always fight back." Without another word, Jax raised his weapon and fired. Kralek's body went limp, his compound eyes glazing over. The remaining Tellarites, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons. Jax's comm crackled to life with Silas's voice. "Engines disabled. The ship is dead in the water." Jax gazed out at the stars, watching as other Tellarite vessels fled in disarray. He keyed his own comm, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention, all resistance forces," he said, his voice steady. "Kralek is dead, the flagship is ours, the tide has turned." As the message went out, Jax turned to survey the bridge. The human fighters stood tall amidst the carnage, bloodied but unbowed. Beyond the view screen, Earth hung in the void, scarred but free. The captured Tellarite flagship hung in low Earth orbit, its once pristine hull scarred by battle. Inside, the mood was tense as Jax strode through corridors lined with a mix of human resistance fighters and surrendered Tellarite crew. He entered the main conference room where raised voices already echoed off the metal walls. "We can't just sit on our asses while those bugs regroup." Kelso smacked his head on the table, his face red with anger. "We need to hit them now, before they have a chance to catch their breath." Zeke leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And what then? Become the very monsters we fought against. We need to focus on rebuilding, not more bloodshed." Jax cleared his throat, silencing the room. "We're all on edge, but fighting amongst ourselves is exactly what the Tellarites want." He activated a holographic display showing the asteroid belt. "Intelligence has located a secret Tellarite research facility here. If we can capture it, we might gain the edge we need without resorting to extreme measures." Max stepped forward, his eyes scanning the tactical readouts. "A stealth insertion could work. We've got those captured Tellarite ships. With the right codes, we could slip right in." Rix nodded, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "My boys are itching for some action. Give us the word, and we'll tear that place apart. Hours later, Max stood on the bridge of a Tellarite stealth ship, its insectoid design still unsettling despite the human crew. They rendezvoused with Rix's assault force at the designated coordinates, the vastness of space making their ships seem tiny and vulnerable. Max keyed the comm, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his gut. "Control, this is Supply Convoy TR-291 requesting approach vector to Research Station Omega." Max nodded to his communications officer, who sent the stolen codes. Sweat beaded on the man's forehead as they waited for a response. "Codes accepted. Proceed to Docking Bay 3. The relief in the air was palpable as they maneuvered toward the asteroid base. As they drew closer, Max could see the facility was far larger than expected, with multiple docking bays and defensive turrets dotting its surface. Once docked, Max's tech team moved swiftly. They bypassed security systems and disabled alarms, clearing the way for Rix and his soldiers to storm the facility. The element of surprise was total. Tellarite scientists and guards alike fell before the human onslaught. Max led a team deeper into the base, searching for any valuable intelligence. In a heavily fortified lab, they found it. Prototype weapons unlike anything they'd seen before. "Holy shit," Max breathed, examining a sleek device. "This thing, it's designed to liquefy organic matter on a molecular level." His second-in-command, Sarah, paled as she scanned through data files. "That's not even the worst of it. They've got plans for a scaled-up version that could affect entire planets." The implications hit Max like a punch to the gut. He keyed his comm. "Rix, we need to scrub this place completely. Nothing can be left for the Tellarites to salvage." As Rix coordinated the evacuation of captured personnel and intel, Maz demolition experts went to work. They rigged the base's antimatter power core to overload, ensuring nothing would remain but scattered debris. The human forces barely made it clear before the asteroid erupted in a silent flash of destruction. Max's ship rocked from the shockwave as they rendezvoused with Jax's flagship. In the war room, Max delivered his report. Jax's face grew grim as he absorbed the implications of the Tellarite weapon. "We've dealt them a blow," Jax said, "but this changes everything. If they're willing to go this far—" Kelso leaned forward, eyes blazing. "We use their own weapons against them. Hit their homeworld, force an unconditional surrender." "And become no better than them," Zeke countered. "We can't cross that line." Silas, silent until now, spoke up. "What about a surgical strike? Take out their leadership, cripple their ability to wage war." Jax paced, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. He thought of Earth scarred but finally free, of the countless lives lost in the struggle, of the promise of peace so tantalizingly close. "We need to end this," Jax said slowly. "But we do it on our terms. I won't let humanity become the very thing we've fought against." He turned to his inner circle, his voice firm. "Prepare our forces. We're taking the fight to the Tellarites, but we do it right." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Jack stared out at the stars. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he knew humanity's future hung in the balance. They would. Jack stood before the holographic display, his eyes fixed on the swirling mass of the uncharted nebula. The eerie glow cast shadows across his face, highlighting the deep lines etched by years of war. "We have no choice," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "The Tellarites' new weapon leaves us no alternative." Zeke stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Jax, think about what you're proposing. We'd be risking everything on one massive gamble." The War Council fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Jax turned to face his inner circle, each of their faces a mask of tension and uncertainty. "Max," Jax said, nodding to his tactical officer, "show them what we're up against." Max tapped a series of commands, and the holographic display zoomed in on a heavily fortified structure, nestled deep within the nebula's roiling clouds. "This is Admiral Vrak's stronghold," Max explained, his voice clipped and professional. Our intelligence suggests he's gathered the bulk of the remaining Tellarite forces here. It's a veritable fortress. Silas leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he studied the defenses. Those outer rings, minefields? Max nodded grimly. Among other nasty surprises, I'm sure, and the nebula's interference will render our long-range sensors useless. We'll be flying blind until we're right on top of them. Kelso's lips curled into a predatory grin. Good. I prefer a close-up fight anyway. Zeke shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. This is madness. We're talking about throwing everything we have at a target we can barely see, let alone hit. Which is why we need your unorthodox approach, Silas, Jack said, turning to the guerrilla tactician. You'll lead a vanguard team disguised as a civilian convoy, slip past their outer defenses and create chaos from within. Silas nodded, already formulating plans. It'll be tight, but we can do it. What about the main assault? That's where you come in, Max, Jax continued. You'll command our primary fleet. Once Silas's team has sown enough confusion, you'll punch through their defenses and link up with his forces. The room erupted into heated debate, voices raised, arguments flying back and forth as the enormity of the plan sank in. This is our one shot at ending this war, Kelso shouted, his face red with anger. Zeke shot back, his words permeated with venom. At what cost? Becoming the very monsters we've fought against? Jack slammed his hand down on the table, silencing the room. Enough, he roared, his eyes blazing. I've made my decision. This operation goes forward. Anyone who can't fall in line can stay behind. The tension in the room was palpable as Jax met each of their gazes in turn. We move out in 48 hours, dismissed. As the others filed out, Jax remained, staring once more at the holographic nebula. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see the flickering image of Dylan Green, the old resistance leader presumed lost after Linux's trap. So you taught me that freedom comes at a price, Dylan, Jack said softly to the empty room. I just hope we're not paying too high a cost. The ghost of Dylan seemed to nod, his weathered face etched with the wisdom of 100 years of oppression and resistance. Jack squared his shoulders, pushing aside his doubts. He strode from the war room, purpose in every step. In 2 days, humanity would make its boldest move yet, a strike at the very heart of Tellarite power. As Jax walked the corridors of the flagship, crews scrambled to make final preparations. The air thrummed with nervous energy. In the hangars, Silas briefed his hand-picked team, their faces grim with the knowledge of the perilous mission ahead. On the bridge, Max pored over tactical simulations, searching for any edge in the coming battle. His eyes were rimmed with dark circles, evidence of sleepless nights spent planning. The human armada, a patchwork fleet of captured Tellarite vessels and newly constructed warships, formed up in the vastness of space. At the vanguard, Silas's team readied their disguised freighters, each packed with enough firepower to level a small moon. As the countdown to launch ticked away, Jack stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, poised on the edge of a knife. In mere hours, they would plunge into the nebula's roiling depths, towards either victory or annihilation. The nebula's swirling gases parted as Silas's makeshift freighters slipped through the outer defenses. On the bridge of the lead ship, Silas watched the sensor displays with anxious anticipation. The screens showed nothing but static. Their gambit had worked. They were ghosts, invisible to the Tellarites' watchful eyes. All ships prepare for pod deployment, Silas whispered into the comm. Remember, absolute radio silence until we're inside. The freighter's hulls split open, disgorging swarms of sleek boarding pods. Silas strapped himself into the command pod, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline as the launch countdown began. 3, 2, 1. With a muffled thump, the pods rocketed towards the looming Tellarite stronghold. Through the viewport, Silas watched the massive structure grow larger, its hull dripping with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. They were committed now. Either they'd breach the defenses or die in the cold vacuum of space. With a bone-jarring impact, Silas's pod slammed into the side of the station. Maglocks engaged, securing them to the hull. Around him, dozens of other pods latched on like metallic leeches. "Breach charges now," Silas barked. Shaped explosives detonated, blowing holes in the station's armor. Silas's team poured through the breach, weapons at the ready. The first Tellarite guards barely had time to react before they were cut down in a hail of gunfire. "Move fast, hit hard," Silas ordered, leading the charge deeper into the station. "We need those security nodes offline." They fought their way through twisting corridors, the element of surprise allowing them to overwhelm isolated pockets of resistance. At a junction, Silas split his force. "Team Alpha, with me to the primary comms hub. Bravo, take out those defense grid relays." As they battled towards their objectives, Silas could hear the sounds of similar firefights echoing through the station. His other insertion teams were hitting their targets, sowing chaos throughout the Tellarite command structure. In the communications hub, Silas personally overrode the main systems, severing Vrak's links to his outer defenses. As alarms blared and confused Tellarite chatter filled the airwaves, Silas allowed himself a grim smile. The trap was sprung. "All teams fall back to defensive positions," he ordered. "Let's roll out the welcome mat for Max." Outside the nebula, Max watched the sensor feeds intently. The lack of coordinated response from the Tellarite forces told him all he needed to know. Silas had succeeded. "Launch the Vanguard," Max commanded. "Full speed ahead." A wave of unmanned ships surged forward, their hulls painted with garish tribal designs, a final insult to their Tellarite creators. As they ploughed into the defensive minefields, Max winced at the countless detonations, but each explosion cleared a path for his main force. "All ships, form up on me," Max ordered as they entered the breach. "Weapons free, hit them with everything we've got." The human armada erupted in a storm of plasma fire and missile salvos. Caught off guard and cut off from central command, the Tellarite defenders crumbled. Max watched with grim satisfaction as entire squadrons of alien ships were reduced to drifting wreckage. On the station, Silas and his teams fought a running battle through the corridors, drawing Tellarite forces away from critical junctions and creating openings for Max's incoming troops. The station shuddered under the impact of heavy bombardment, and Silas knew the tide had turned. As Max's forces established their chokehold around the central hub, Admiral Vrak's once mighty bastion began to falter. The Tellarites lashed out in increasingly desperate counterattacks, but each assault was met with overwhelming firepower. Deep in the bowels of the station, Jax led his shock troopers through the final defensive lines. They fought tooth and nail for every meter, leaving a trail of Tellarite corpses in their wake. Jax's armor was scarred and pitted, his face streaked with blood and grime. "Push forward," he roared, firing his plasma rifle one-handed as he vaulted over a barricade. "Vrak is just ahead." "You think this is victory, human?" Vrak snarled. "You've only sealed your doom." Vrak lunged forward with surprising speed for his bulk. Jax barely managed to dodge the first swing of the alien's blade, feeling it slice through his armor and into flesh. They grappled in the midst of the chaotic melee, neither willing to give ground. Jax gasped as Vrak's weapon found purchase again, driving deep into his side. But even as his strength faltered, Jax summoned one last surge of desperate energy. With a primal roar, he wrenched the weapon from Vrak's grasp and drove it home into the Tellarite's throat. As Vrak collapsed, gurgling his last breaths, Jax felt a moment of savage triumph, but the Admiral's final words turned his blood to ice. "Fool," Vrak wheezed, "the disruptors already inactivated. All forces withdraw immediately. The station is going to self-destruct." What should have been a moment of victory turned into a frantic race against time. Jax and his commandos fought their way back through the station, now racked by tremors as the molecular disruptors began their grim work. They left behind hard-won gains and priceless intelligence, focused only on escape. As the human fleet pulled back from the disintegrating Tellarite bastion, the true cost of their victory became apparent. The nebula itself seemed to shudder as the prototype weapons tore apart matter at its most fundamental level. Where once stood the mightiest stronghold of their oppressors, now there was only a slowly expanding cloud of radioactive dust. Jack stood on the bridge of the flagship, his wounds hastily bandaged, as reports of similar destructions poured in from across human space. They had won, but at what price? The scars of this victory would linger far longer than any physical wounds. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.